Okay, welcome to the final part of our first exam review. If you're looking for these BCBA exams, you can find 1, 2, and 3 on bcbastudy.com. Questions, comments, please let me know. I'd love to help. As always, work hard, study hard. Let's do our questions. 179, which of the following would not be considered speaker behavior? So remember, we have speaker behavior, we have listener behavior. Speaker behavior is the person saying to do something, labeling, manding, etc., right? Telling the listener what to do. The listener is responding and doing the thing. So we are looking for something not considered speaker behavior. So A, you use sign language to communicate your order in the Chick-fil-A drive-through line. Are you manding? Are you communicating your order? Are you the speaker? Yes, you are. Using sign language is verbal behavior. You're the speaker. You're communicating to the listeners to Chick-fil-A drive-through line. B, when you walk into the bar, your friend gestures at you to come over and sit with them. All right, be careful, right? You walking into the bar is not speaker behavior, but your friend gesturing at you to come over and sit with them is. Who's the speaker? Your friend. Who's the listener? Well, you. So B is speaker behavior. Just because the first part isn't, doesn't make the second part irrelevant. C, a picture exchange communication system used in a classroom outside of an ABA setting. Setting doesn't matter, right? The whole idea is that we use it outside of our ABA setting. And anyway, PECS is always going to be a type of speaker behavior, right? We are speaking, we are communicating. PECS, pictures, are definitely a type of verbal speaker behavior. So leaves us with D, an audience who starts to cheer in response to a call a referee made for their team. So in response, okay, to a call, the audience starts to cheer. If it's in response, it isn't speaker behavior, okay? They're not engaging in speaker behavior, right? They're responding to a call the referee made. D is the answer. Nate throws a desk across the room. His teacher says, okay, Nate, go sit in the hallway for 10 minutes. What type of procedure would this be? It's pretty easy, okay? It's almost too easy. If we're sending Nate to the hallway as a type of punishment, well, what type of timeout is it? Is it non-exclusion? Well, no, Nate is being excluded. Is it partition? No, there's no partition being set out. Is it timeout ribbon? No, Nate is not giving a ribbon or some sort of mark. Nate is told to go to the hallway and sit in timeout. Hallway timeout is a legitimate intervention. Nate being sent to the hallway for 10 minutes is hallway timeout. 181, Blaine wants to conduct research on teaching young adults financial responsibility. He is unsure of what order he should present the treatments as he is concerned that each treatment might influence each other. What experimental design might be best for Blaine to compare all of the treatments? All right. If Blaine is worried about treatments influencing each other, what should he use? A couple things going on. First, we know he is teaching this skill. Okay. Since he is teaching this skill, what can he use? Well, he can't use changing criterion design. Once he teaches a skill, then he could use changing criterion, right, to strengthen or reduce it. But we don't use changing criterions to teach skills. What about multiple baseline? Well, he is worried about different treatments. Remember, multiple baseline is across settings, subjects, or behaviors. We're still using the same treatment. So it's not going to be best to compare the treatments. A multi-element design, one of the downfalls is we have this idea that treatments might influence each other, right? Treatment interference, okay? I run treatment after another back to back to back to back. Each one might start conflicting with the other. Only in a withdrawal design will he be able to do a baseline, implement intervention 1, go back to baseline, implement intervention 2, go back to baseline, so on and so forth. Now, who's to say that each intervention won't impact the next? You can't say that 100%, but at least doing it that way, we're only looking at one intervention at a time. We can compare each and their effects, and we're not having to deal with the challenge of a multi-element design where you're doing one after another back to back to back, and each is potentially suffering from a carryover. So what experimental design might be best? It's going to be a withdrawal design. Oops, sorry. Okay, 182. You want to use a trial-based stimulus preference assessment. Which of the following assessments should you use? What does trial-based mean? Don't overthink it. Well, discrete trials are what? Clear beginning and end. A trial one is one set of a beginning to an end, okay, antecedent behavior consequence or a stimulus response. It's a trial, right? If a trial-based stimulus preference assessment, well, we're going to start to contrive it, okay? We're going to have a clear beginning and end to each trial. Is a single stimulus preference assessment a type of trial-based preference assessment? Sure. I show you iPad, I record your response. I show you truck, I record your response. These are trials. Naturalistic observation, okay, is a type of preference assessment if you just naturally observe, okay, but it's not trial-based, okay? We are just observing. An interview is not a type of trial-based preference assessment because we're just asking them questions. And then a contrived observation, okay, isn't a type of preference assessment, right? If we're going to naturally observe, okay, we have a single stimulus, we have a forced choice, we have multiple stimulus, and then we have this idea of a free operant or natural observation. So if we're looking at a trial-based stimulus preference assessment, we're going to use a single stimulus preference assessment. 183, the response deprivation hypothesis is most commonly associated with which of the following terms? What is the idea behind the response deprivation hypothesis? Well, the hypothesis says if you are deprived of a response, engaging in that response becomes more and more reinforcing. If you love to play video games, the more you're deprived of video games, the more reinforcing and motivating video games become. So what is the idea? If we're using a activity or response as the reinforcer, what are we doing? Is that a high probability request sequence? Well, no, high P, low P is almost the reverse, right? We're getting them to engage in a lot of high probability responses to get a low probability. We're really looking at the Premack principle, grandma's law. If you eat your vegetables, you can play outside. If you do your homework, you get to play video games. Depriving them of outside, depriving them of video games increases the reinforcing power and the motivation to engage in the lower probability behavior of eating vegetables or doing homework. So the response deprivation hypothesis is commonly associated with the Premack principle. Each morning on his way to work, Jim listens to the same podcast, orders the same coffee, and eats the same bagel. Jim does not understand what maintains his routine. This is an example of what? In order for something to be reinforcing, in order for somebody to be influenced by consequences, do they need to know that they're being reinforced? Do they need to know that their behavior is being changed? Nope. They have to not understand. They don't have to understand at all what's reinforcing, what's punishing, what the consequence is. In this case, Jim does all these things, doesn't understand why he does them, but he does them. Is this arbitrary behavior selection? Well, no, they're not arbitrary behaviors, right? Is it automaticity of reinforcement? Yes, it is. That is the idea that the learner or the person involved does not need to be aware that they're being reinforced or punished in order for it to be effective. Contiguity of reinforcement is just closeness of reinforcement. We don't actually know anything about the reinforcers in this case, right? So we don't know anything about the contiguity. And then self-monitoring. Jim obviously isn't self-monitoring if he doesn't understand what maintains his routine. The idea here is automaticity of reinforcement. Just because Jim doesn't understand it doesn't make it not reinforcing. And then finally, 185, for actual data collection, it is important that new technicians and trainees experience what? So personnel management. Before we actually let technicians loose into the wild to start taking data, what do we need to ensure? A, different behaviors demonstrating the 4 different functions of behavior. Well, maybe, but if we really just want our technicians to start on a couple cases, if all those cases share the same function, we don't necessarily need to demonstrate all these different behaviors. B, a functional behavior assessment conducted by a behavior analyst. It is not necessary that trainees and technicians experience an FBA. They're welcome to assist if needed, but it's not necessary. C, numerous practice sessions. Yes, we want to be sure they're competent. We want to specify, we want to train, we want to monitor, and then reinforce. And we do that through practice. Before we let them go and do it in real time, in real life, we want to make sure they're competent through numerous practice sessions. Okay, that's the end of exam 1. Be sure to check out exam 2 and 3. Questions, comments, let me know. Every Saturday, we have more BCBA practice questions. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.